Hello, welcome to the channel Why Stories. Enjoy watching.
Daniela sat at the kitchen table, not turning on the light. In front of her was a bottle of wine. The woman looked at her wedding ring with bitterness. It shimmered so beautifully in the light of the street lamps that penetrated the dark room. Daniela always took care of this precious ornament, often cleaning it. It looked brand new. Although almost 18 years had passed since her wedding, Daniela suddenly thought that this was not her first wedding ring, and a smile touched her lips. Despite her current condition, the woman felt warmth in her heart. It was always like this when a vivid episode from her childhood resurfaced in her memory. Daniela cherished this memory. She was around 5 or 6 years old. In the kindergarten group, the air filled with the beloved scent of porridge, and next to her was that boy, whose name Daniela had forgotten over 30 years, but always recognized him in the photos, so slender, with dark eyes, and so charming. The boy shared candies with her, protected her from other children, and helped her with everything. He made her bed, stood guard for her, reached the dolls on the top shelves, and made simple gifts for his friend. They often played or drew together. Even at the age of 5, Daniela could appreciate such attention, and it was very pleasant. One day, the boy put a little ring on her finger. He made it himself from soft wire and even managed to incorporate a small beautiful gemstone into the ornament. "What's this?" Daniela asked with admiration, examining the gift. "I made you a ring. I saw it on TV. First, men give rings to women, and then they get married. I definitely want to marry you when I grow up, and no one else. So, I'm giving you the ring." "Thank you," Daniela smiled, "then I'll marry you too when I grow up." "That's great," the boy smiled happily, "because you're the most beautiful and best girl in the world." Daniela blossomed with these words. Her heart felt warm, and the pleasant feeling was not forgotten even now, after more than 3 decades. The friends called the boy to join them in a game of football. The groom smiled at Daniela and rushed towards the boys. And Daniela still remembered his joyful, open childlike smile, with a missing tooth in the front row. It seemed that the boy from the kindergarten was her first love. And they say you never forget such things. In school, Daniela had never experienced such feelings. But in her first year of college, she fell in love in a more mature way, to the point where she couldn't think of anything else but her object of affection. His name was Roberto, just like her, a freshman student. They were in different groups but met during shared lectures and seminars. And his appearance wasn't exactly Hollywood-like, skinny, blonde, freckled, but he immediately caught Daniela's attention. She felt drawn to her classmate like a magnet. It was difficult to explain and describe in words. His relaxed and agile movements, confident gaze, and springy walk captivated Daniela. From a distance, she admired Roberto, always surrounded by people. Roberto possessed an incredible charisma and quickly became one of the stars of their course. It turned out he was also a great guitar player. And how cleverly he responded to professors and friends. Daniela couldn't help smiling every time and sometimes even laughed at his jokes. However, the girl never dreamed that Roberto would ever notice her. In 4 years of studying, he never said a word to her other than the obligatory hello. Daniela was an ordinary gray mouse, and he was a star. The most beautiful girls from the university revolved around him. However, all his relationships were fleeting and unserious. It must be difficult to make a choice when you have so many options. Daniela resigned herself to this situation and didn't even try to change anything. She only tried to hide her feelings from others and continued to admire her prince from afar. Only in her dreams did Daniela allow herself to imagine a different life. In her imaginary reality, Roberto was head over heels in love with her. Sometimes he would save her from unwanted attention at a club, or they would fly together to a luxurious resort, or they would have a wedding. These were very pleasant fantasies that, unfortunately, were not destined to come true. What chance did Daniela have compared to the beauties flocking around the popular classmate? One day, the students decided to organize a group hike. Of course, in the end, only a few people actually went on the trip, but they managed to gather about 25 students from different groups, including Daniela. She didn't enjoy spending nights in uncomfortable tents, hygiene procedures by the river, or the mixed with dust camping food. But she desperately wanted to be closer to Roberto, so she, of course, couldn't miss such an event, so Daniela decided to go. The students traveled to the forest in a rented bus, and they had to drive to a different region, so they spent several hours on the road. Roberto, as always, was the center of attention. He joked a lot, played the guitar, came up with fun games to pass the time. And during the hours of the trip, he said more words to Daniela than in 4 years of studying. It was because there weren't many people on the bus, and everyone had to communicate with each other. When Roberto first called her by name, Daniela felt a pleasant shiver run through her body. It was so amazing that she didn't hear his subsequent words. Roberto smiled with his famous broad smile and repeated the question. The students reached the forest, put on their backpacks, and continued on foot. They found a suitable meadow and set up a tent camp. It was getting dark. They quickly lit a campfire, cooked canned soup, all while engaging in non-stop conversations and laughter. Daniela had never had so much fun. Roberto, as always, played the guitar, and the students sang along. Daniela sat between her two friends and couldn't take her eyes off the guy. Unnoticed, it became dark, and the sky was covered with bright large stars that couldn't be seen in the city. Daniela looked at them with wide eyes. If she tilted her head back and ignored the external sounds, it felt like she was in open space. The girl felt someone's gaze on her. She turned around. Roberto was looking straight at her, not with his usual indifference, but with interest. He seemed to be ignoring the beautiful classmate who was talking in his ear, as he was not listening to her. "It's wonderful, right?" Roberto turned to Daniela. She understood that he had noticed her admiration for the stars and shared it. It warmed her heart, and for the first time, the girl smiled at him without feeling embarrassed. "I've never seen anything like this," Daniela confessed. The campfire began to die down. One of the classmates gave the command to gather firewood. Daniela decided to look for some nearby, behind the neighboring bushes. It was a little scary to venture into the dark forest. "Come, I'll show you the real wonder," Roberto said. He was standing nearby. Daniela couldn't believe that this was happening to her. He approached on his own and even called her somewhere. It seemed more like a situation from her fantasies than reality. Roberto took Daniela's hand and led her straight through the forest, illuminating the way with a flashlight. They reached one of the hills, of which there were many around, but the other hills were completely overgrown with trees, bushes, and tall grass, while this one had a beaten path leading upwards. Roberto and Daniela started climbing it, and it was a bit difficult to go up the steep slope, but the girl tried her best to show that it wasn't harder for her than for Roberto, who climbed with a cat-like agility. In a few particularly dangerous spots, he reached out his hand to Daniela and helped her up. "Come on, we're almost there." "You'll definitely appreciate it," Roberto encouraged. He didn't know that Daniela was ready to follow him to the ends of the earth, and here it was just a hill. Soon, the classmates reached the smooth hilltop. The sky was clear, and now the stars were shining not only from above, but also seemed to be surrounding them from all sides. In the bright moonlight, everything appeared magical and mysterious. "Look down," Roberto smiled. Daniela couldn't help but sigh at the breathtaking view that unfolded before her. The forest was far below, and in the open spaces, a fast river curved like a silver ribbon, stretching as far as the eye could see. The hilly landscape covered with trees spread out, all bathed in the mysterious light of the moon and the bright stars. It seemed as if civilization didn't exist at all, only this pristine, untouched by human hand nature. Roberto eagerly observed Daniela's reaction. "I saw how fascinated you were by the stars, and I knew I had to show you this place. You'll definitely appreciate it," he said. "Thank you." Daniela turned her gaze to Roberto. "It's stunningly beautiful here. Words can't describe it." Roberto sat down on a moss-covered rock, looked around once again, clearly enjoying the sights. "It reminds me of the set for a movie based on my favorite author's book," he remarked. "Wait, you read?" Daniela asked, her question almost sounding offended. No, Roberto was a smart guy who could engage in any conversation, and he was a good student too. It's just that there was always a bustling life around him, and Daniela found it hard to imagine him calmly spending time with a book. As for herself, she simply adored reading. It also reminds me of the books by my favorite writer, Daniela smiled. I love Stephen King. What a coincidence, Roberto chuckled in his voice. That's exactly who I had in mind. They talked about books and movies, and then seamlessly transitioned to discussing philosophical questions. It turned out they were interested in the same topics. It's so easy to talk to you, Roberto admitted. Daniela felt the same way. Roberto turned out to be a pleasant and intelligent conversationalist. Right now, he wasn't a star or a charismatic leader of the class, but a thoughtful, attentive friend, genuine and caring. During this conversation, the moment seemed perfect for a kiss under the moon. What could be more romantic? Daniela stumbled on an invisible rock in the grass and started to fall. Roberto skillfully caught her by the shoulders, and now they stood embraced, their faces close. Roberto looked into her eyes attentively, and Daniela was filled with anticipation, but nothing happened. Be careful, there are tree roots sticking out of the ground here. I once tripped and almost tumbled down, he warned. Roberto and Daniela returned to their friends. The girls flocked around Roberto again. And it seemed like everything was going as before, but so much had changed. Now, Roberto and Daniela often met eyes and subtly smiled at each other. Daniela felt happy, almost like in her dreams. And then one day, Roberto unexpectedly invited her to the movies to watch a Stephen King adaptation. And there, in the darkness of the cinema, their first kiss happened. Since then, they officially became a couple, much to the surprise and disappointment of Roberto's numerous admirers. Daniela's life changed dramatically. It was filled with parties, hikes, walks, concerts, and interesting encounters. Roberto constantly gave her vivid impressions. The fast-paced rhythm sometimes tired Daniela, who was naturally reserved, but she was still happy. Roberto treated her with great care and respect, unlike his previous girlfriends. Daniela herself noticed it, and she heard it from Roberto's friends as well. They openly said that he had never had such a strong and serious relationship before. Daniela felt happy and loved. Roberto took tender care of her, anticipated her desires, and he often admitted that he adored Daniela's smile, finding ways to bring it out. They talked a lot, and these conversations felt like therapy for both of them, leaving their souls light and bright. How lucky I am to have met you, Roberto would sometimes say, looking into Daniela's happy eyes. She felt the same way. And then it turned out that Daniela was expecting a child. It happened during their 5th year of college. They were about to graduate, find jobs, and establish themselves, and now this. But Daniela had already decided that she would keep the baby, no matter the cost, as it was a child from her beloved. The news didn't scare Roberto. Daniela hadn't ruled out such an outcome herself and was shocked too. The news surprised him, but clearly made him happy. I wanted to propose to you differently, of course, Roberto smiled, but since it turned out this way, we'll have to keep it simple. Will you marry me? Of course, Daniela said. Tears of relief filled Daniela's eyes. Don't worry about money. You know I've already started working at the bank. I'll switch to part-time education and work full-time. We can live in my uncle's apartment for now. He's been abroad for a long time, and the apartment is empty. Roberto planned and resolved everything so easily and quickly that Daniela felt completely protected. Perhaps this was the feeling of being behind a stone wall. Daniela quickly finished her glass of wine. She wasn't used to relieving stress this way, but today she needed to relax and try to forget, or else she wouldn't be able to sleep. Tomorrow, she had a serious conversation with her husband ahead. She made a final decision. Daniela looked thoughtfully at her wedding ring and abruptly took it off her finger. The piece of jewelry bounced on the table with a melodious sound. Daniela and Roberto had a lively student wedding, and their married life began. It turned out that the newlywed husband could do it all, cook, do laundry, and clean. His dinners were much tastier than Daniela's, but she also made an effort to become a good housewife. Roberto indeed switched to part-time studies to have the opportunity to work at the bank full-time and earn more money because their expenses would increase when the baby arrived. He didn't want to rely on his parents' help. He preferred to feel like the head of the family himself, and this desire made Daniela respect him even more, a young man who was already serious and independent. The newlyweds thought that their baby would come after graduation, but life had its own plans. The very first ultrasound revealed that they were expecting twins. As often happens, the twins were born slightly premature, and the new parents had to defend their diplomas in extreme conditions. Studying and preparing amidst the cries of their two newborn sons was quite a challenge, but Daniela was happy. It seemed that her husband was happy too. The difficulties only strengthened them, made them stronger, and brought them closer. Daniela understood that everything was going as it should. After graduation, life became calmer and more settled. Roberto fully devoted himself to work, which he liked, enjoyed, and found inspiring. The intelligent and sharp-witted guy quickly climbed the career ladder, while Daniela took care of their little sons, hoping to catch up on her own aspirations later. Her red diploma, a source of special pride, lay on the shelf in the closet, something that had yet to find its purpose, and it was unclear when it would be needed, if ever. The twins grew up smart and adorable but suffered from frequent illnesses due to being born 1.5 months premature. They hardly attended daycare as they often fell ill there. The pediatrician advised keeping them at home until school age, giving them time to grow stronger, hoping that everything would be fine then. And so, Daniela became a stay-at-home mom for many years. Roberto earned a good income and provided for the family. The woman seemed happy, but she also wanted to be out in the world. She had been considered one of the most successful students in her class. And now, her classmates who were average students had reached certain heights in their careers, while Daniela hadn't worked a single day since graduation. However, she had everything she needed for happiness: a beloved and loving husband, two wonderful sons, and their own spacious and cozy apartment. Time went by, the children grew up, and Roberto's attitude gradually changed unnoticed. If before, the spouses could spend hours discussing various topics, from children and work to the details of celebrities' lives, now they fell silent more often. Or rather, Daniela, out of habit, would try to start a conversation, but Roberto would brush it off. Now he preferred computer games and being on his phone. He even needed reminders to interact with their sons, whereas before, he would come up with engaging activities for them. Daniela loved watching her husband play and interact with the boys, seeing them all laugh with happiness. Gradually, those moments started to fade away. Now, the young father was increasingly annoyed by the children's noise and toys scattered everywhere. The couple was clearly growing apart. Roberto became distant, almost like a stranger. He no longer looked at his wife with the same attention and admiration. All of this hurt and scared Daniela. She couldn't pinpoint any specific grievances against her husband. He was faithfully fulfilling his responsibilities. However, their relationship lacked the warmth and sincerity they once had. One day, Daniela decided to have an open conversation. She had heard that every family goes through crises, and problems in such situations should never be ignored. "Don't make things up. I'm just really tired from work," Roberto brushed her off at the time. Years passed, the twins grew stronger and started school. Daniela finally had the opportunity to pursue her career. She had to start from the bottom, but she didn't feel discouraged. She immersed herself in the world of numbers and financial reports with pleasure. Meanwhile, Roberto developed his own business, and things were going more than well. The family moved first to a larger apartment and then to a luxurious country house. From the outside, Roberto seemed like the perfect husband. He worked hard but made sure to take vacations twice a year with his wife and children. However, even on those trips, Roberto seemed somewhat distant. He would hug Daniela, give her compliments, buy her gifts, and have fun with the children, but she could feel that his mind was somewhere far away. Daniela convinced herself that Roberto had changed because of the stress and pressure from work. After all, he provided a comfortable life for their family, and he carried a great deal of responsibility on his shoulders. It was only natural for him to no longer be as carefree and playful as he was in his youth. Besides, how many couples in the world manage to maintain their romance after years of everyday life? Daniela longed for their soulful conversations, warm embraces, and meaningful glances. But she believed that all of that would return once Roberto's business became more stable. She always made an effort to appear flawless for her husband. She didn't relax, even when tired from work or feeling unwell. Manicured nails, clean and well-groomed hair, stylish clothes for staying at home, Daniela regularly visited the gym and cosmetologist. She had gotten used to considering herself plain, while her husband always attracted many beautiful and glamorous women. That's why Daniela took her self-improvement seriously. The result exceeded all expectations. Daniela received numerous compliments, and the gazes from the men around her became even more expressive. Roberto, too, didn't skimp on praise, but it sounded rather perfunctory, not like before when their relationship was just beginning. Daniela gazed thoughtfully out of the window. It was very late, and there was no one in the courtyard. She shifted her gaze to the photograph from that memorable hiking trip when she and Roberto became closer. The historic snapshot held a prominent place on the shelf of the electric fireplace. In it, she was still very young, sitting next to the 20-year-old Roberto, cheerful, attentive, and sensitive. That was the Roberto she missed dearly. The photo was taken shortly after their life-changing conversation on the hill, before they even became a couple. At that time, Daniela already felt that she had genuinely captured Roberto's interest. The woman studied the photograph. Why did she consider herself plain? She was such an attractive and slim girl, with large green eyes, a beautiful white smile, and shiny chestnut hair. Young Daniela lacked confidence in herself, and perhaps that carried into her adulthood as well. But she would find the strength to make one important decision: she would no longer live with Roberto. He had no idea that she knew about his betrayal, or rather, what he had done could not be called anything else. The twins surprisingly grew up smart. They both consistently received top grades at school, and studying came easily to them. The boys frequently participated in various competitions and almost always returned with prizes. In the 5th grade, they became interested in programming. As they approached the end of school, they became true prodigies and were even earning a decent income. Daniela didn't understand much about their codes and programming languages, but she knew that the boys collaborated remotely with people from other cities and even countries. She was proud of her successful boys and delighted in their victories. The twins didn't resemble their father. At their age, Roberto had been the life of the party, while the boys displayed more restraint, taking after their mother. No one was surprised when the boys, who were still in high school, were invited to study at a prestigious technological university in capital. Their achievements were already known, and people were keeping an eye on the activities of these talented programmer boys. They were offered full scholarships and places in the university dormitories on campus. It was nerve-wracking for Daniela to let her sons, who had just finished high school, venture into independent life. But Roberto said it was their chance. If you constantly keep boys under your skirt, nothing good will come out of it. Intellectually, Daniela understood it all herself, but her heart squeezed with anxiety at the thought that her children might suddenly find themselves completely alone in the vast metropolis, which, in her opinion, was full of dangers. The boys went off to study. The house became completely empty. Daniela and Roberto started living almost like neighbors. Whenever she tried to talk to her husband about it, he would simply dismiss her concerns. "Don't drag problems out of thin air. Everything is fine. What more do you need?" he would say. But Daniela yearned for emotional warmth, conversations, and her husband's support. She missed the old Roberto immensely and already suspected that he was unlikely to return, but she still held on to hope. Her only outlet became her work. There was no real need for a salary, but Daniela enjoyed coming to work every day. At least here, she could socialize. Moreover, she found a true friend there. Julia was her peer and worked in the neighboring department. They often crossed paths for work-related matters. Julia appeared to be the complete opposite of Daniela, curvaceous, loud, self-assured. She wasn't afraid to speak her mind to people and never held back her words. In any situation, she had a sharp and witty response ready. Julia was raising 2 children on her own, an 8-year-old son and a 6-year-old daughter. She had divorced her husband 3 years ago and didn't regret it one bit. She occasionally had relationships, but she didn't plan anything serious for herself. "No, I won't get married again," Julia assured Daniela. "I prefer the freedom of single life." One might think that there could be nothing in common between such different women, but Daniela and Julia quickly became best friends. They shared all their secrets and problems with each other. Julia's life seemed vibrant and interesting to Daniela, as if she were a character in a TV series. In turn, Julia admired Daniela's level-headedness and restraint. "If we could mix ourselves together and then separate, we'd become the perfect woman," Julia would jokingly say at times. Of course, Daniela trusted her friend with her worries and shared how her husband's estrangement bothered her. "He probably has a mistress," Julia would say. "He's a handsome man with money, and men like him always attract many women." Daniela tried to push away such thoughts, but Roberto had become completely different. The old husband who loved her and couldn't take his eyes off her would never be capable of such deceit, but today's Roberto. Daniela didn't know or understand him. The woman had tried to change the situation multiple times. One evening, when Roberto returned from work, she initiated a serious conversation with him once again. She had an idea that, in her opinion, could help their family. "Let's have another child," Daniela suggested. "What?" Roberto even choked on his coffee. "Why? We've already raised the boys. What more do we need?" "That's exactly it," Daniela smiled, moving closer. "The house is empty now, we're still young and healthy, and we have no financial problems. Why not experience that happiness again? Maybe it's time to enjoy life?" Roberto objected. "Maybe we've finally deserved peace and relaxation? Just imagine, what if we have a daughter as beautiful as you? I'm sure she would become the most beloved person in your life. A baby is always a joy." "Well, no, I'm not ready," Roberto objected. Then he approached his wife, kissed her forehead, and made a suggestion. "Maybe I can help you start some business so you won't be bored." "No, I'm quite content with my job," Daniela sighed disappointedly. The idea that seemed so successful to her didn't receive any response from her husband. She remembered how he had rejoiced at the news of her pregnancy 18 years ago and had hoped it would be the same now. Daniela covered her wedding ring with her palm. Now it lay on the kitchen table, and this adornment would never be on her ring finger again. The phone rang. Julia's number appeared on the screen. "Hi, my friend. What are you up to?" "I'm drinking and feeling sad." "What a fun evening. Come with me to the bar." "Get ready, I'll pick you up in a taxi in 20 minutes. "I'm not in the mood today." "Not in the mood, huh? But I might not have a free evening when you're in the mood. My parents took the kids for a couple of days, so I'm as free as a bird. And it's Friday, we can't miss this chance." Daniela pondered, why not, indeed? Sitting alone in a dark apartment and longing for a betraying husband isn't a great prospect. "All right, I'm getting ready. See you soon." On her birthday, Roberto gave his wife an apartment, a spacious studio near her workplace. A professional designer had taken care of the interior design. "Are you kicking me out of the house?" Daniela exclaimed, surprised, as she looked around the luxurious apartment. "Ha," what she blurted out, Roberto smiled, embracing his astonished wife. "You wake up at the crack of dawn every morning to make it to your office on time, and you come back very late, looking exhausted." It was the absolute truth. In order to commute to work on time from their suburban settlement, Daniela had to wake up at 6 a.m. The studio apartment near the office solved a whole range of problems, but then she and her husband would only see each other on weekends. Not the best situation for them, especially when their relationship was already going through a crisis. Roberto seemed to understand what his wife was thinking and added, "You wouldn't mind if I occasionally stayed here, would you?" "You would be the most welcome guest," Daniela sincerely replied. Soon, the woman realized that the idea with the apartment was a good one. Daniela wholeheartedly loved her cozy little nest. It felt comfortable and peaceful. Sometimes, Roberto would indeed stay overnight, usually when he had to be somewhere in the city or at the airport early in the morning. The apartment became a real home for Daniela, and for her husband, it became a transit point. The most frequent guest here was Julia. Sometimes, Daniela would invite other colleagues as well. "I love being here," Julia admitted one day. The friends lounged on the couch, watched a TV series, and had dinner with food ordered from a Japanese restaurant. "It's so quiet and peaceful here. But in my place, it's constant noise. The kids argue about everything, constantly nagging, and I have to help the elder one with homework. It's exhausting. If someone gave me the gift of my own apartment, I would barricade myself there and never leave." Today, when Daniela left the office in the evening, she discovered that her car wouldn't start. It was already late, and she really wanted to go home, but this happened. Daniela tried a few more times, but the engine showed no signs of life. So she called her husband and told him about the problem. "I happen to be nearby," he replied. "I'll pick you up and call the mechanics." Daniela smiled. Yes, Roberto had stopped being understanding and attentive like in their youth, but he was reliable. In a difficult moment, you could count on him. He would never let you down. On the way, the spouses stopped by the supermarket, bought groceries for the weekend. It was Friday, so Daniela was going home, not to her apartment, and she would spend this evening with her husband. The woman absent-mindedly looked out the window at the passing city streets. It was pleasant to relax in the passenger seat. Suddenly, out of the corner of her eye, she noticed something flat and pink protruding from the gap between the seat and the gearbox. Without knowing why, Daniela decided not to reveal this discovery to Roberto. Perhaps her intuition kicked in. It was better to wait. The object was a vibrant pink shade with some glitter, and it troubled her. She kept stealing glances at it. It seemed to be a smartphone, and it's definitely not a man's phone. The husband pulled into a gas station. While he was paying, Daniela pulled out the phone. It turned out there was no password on it. On the screen, there was a very interesting photo of her husband in the arms of an attractive young woman. The embrace did not appear to be friendly. The lady was smiling widely at the camera, and Roberto looked very happy and in love. Admiration for his companion was evident in his eyes. This fact caused Daniela a particular pain. She quickly opened the gallery, and there were many photos of the phone's owner. The attractive girl clearly enjoyed posing, which was not surprising at all. She had the appearance of a supermodel, a slim figure, gorgeous hair, perfect facial features, and she definitely knew how to present herself. There were also pictures with Roberto. The couple often posed embracing each other. With this girl, her husband looked completely different, joyful, happy, and in love, almost like many years ago at the beginning of their relationship, except now he was much more mature and distinguished. What outraged Daniela the most were the photos taken in their own home. So, her husband bought her a separate apartment, supposedly taking care of his spouse, while he himself brought his lover to their home. Judging by the photos, Roberto traveled a lot with passion. The couple loved expensive resorts. Apparently, not all of her husband's business trips were work-related. And this romantic affair had been going on for 6 to 7 years, according to the dates. A considerable amount of time. How could she not have realized anything during all this time? Daniela saw Roberto returning, so she quickly put the phone back. She didn't want to start a conversation right now. She felt tired, empty, and confused. She needed to gather herself and calm down. "Please take me to the apartment," she quietly asked. "Why?" her husband asked in surprise. "The weekend is coming. didn't you miss being at home?" Daniela didn't want to return to the place where the lover had recently been in charge. "I forgot about work in the morning because of the car. We have all hands on deck, there's an inspection coming." "All right." Roberto didn't seem disappointed and turned the car around. On the way, Daniela glanced at the pink phone and wondered how it ended up in that narrow space. Did it simply slip out of the stranger's pocket when Roberto gave her a ride, or was it something else? Daniela was getting ready to go to the bar. It was a very cozy place that Julia had introduced her to. Julia had been a regular at the establishment since her college years, and she had many acquaintances there. Daniela immediately liked the comfortable atmosphere and friendly ambience of the bar. It consisted of several rooms, with live music always playing in one of them. Here, guests could request their favorite songs from the musicians for free and sing along with the other patrons. The other rooms also had their own unique comfort, allowing everyone to choose their preferred setting. If you loved karaoke, you were welcome in the green room. If you preferred quiet conversations and an elegant ambience, the sand lounge awaited you. Daniela and Julia usually preferred the room where the musicians played. They even had their favorite table not far from the stage. Meeting with her friend on a difficult evening was just what she needed. Daniela was delighted by Julia's unexpected call, as always, and quickly got ready. Today, she wanted to look stunning, so she chose trousers and a top that accentuated her slim figure, paired with high-heeled shoes. Her makeup was refined and subtle, with just a touch of color on her lips and lashes, making Daniela appear younger and lovelier. After some consideration, she decided to leave her shiny chestnut hair down. She had recently turned 38, and many of her acquaintances started dyeing their hair at this age, but Daniela still didn't have a single gray hair, and even her wrinkles, even the ones caused by facial expressions, didn't bother her yet. She admired herself in the mirror and was satisfied with the result. It was hard to believe that this slender young beauty already had 2 grown-up sons. Daniela looked just as good as Roberto's blonde lover. But it's better not to think about them for now, it instantly spoils the mood. "Wow, you look stunning," Julia commented when Daniela came down to the taxi. "Well, we both look pretty good," Daniela replied. "You can't argue with that. But is it just me, or do your eyes look strange? Were you crying, or is it an allergy? They also seem sad." "Something happened," Daniela admitted and told the story that had happened today. Sharing her pain with her friend, Daniela felt a sense of relief. Julia immediately rushed to her defense. "What a traitor," her friend exclaimed. "And he even brings his mop to your home. But I'm not surprised that he has a lover. I warned you about it a long time ago, but you didn't want to believe it." "Well, what can I do? That's the kind of fool I am. A naive girl who couldn't even keep her husband." "No, don't say that. He's the one at fault, and you blame yourself for everything. That's where all the trouble comes from. You should value and take care of yourself. That's what we'll focus on now." The taxi pulled up to the bar, and the friends entered their favorite room. Today, a familiar guitarist was on stage. Daniela loved how he played with soul and evident pleasure. This man often chose lyrical compositions. Daniela was in the right mood for such music today. The friends placed their order and, as always, engaged in lively conversations and laughter. Next to Julia, the things that happened didn't seem so tragic to Daniela anymore. After all, she and Roberto had long grown apart from each other. How fortunate that she found this phone today. Now everything fell into place, and there was an explanation for her husband's coldness and indifference. Daniela had been searching for reasons within herself, blaming herself, while the real cause was his extramarital affair, which had been going on for quite some time and was serious. Well, so be it. Now they would get a divorce. Daniela would permanently move into her beloved apartment and be happy despite everything. Deep down, she knew that her positive mindset was influenced by the drinks, the presence of her best friend, and the atmosphere of the bar. In the morning, the problem would come crashing down on her with full force, and it would hurt a lot. But for now, Daniela preferred to enjoy the moment and not think about the sadness. Since early childhood, it seemed as if two people were living inside Sandro. One was serious, attentive, and goal-oriented, who loved certainty and stability. The other was an incurable romantic, dreaming of adventures and capable of impulsive actions. The first half of his personality allowed Sandro to become a successful surgeon, sought after by people from all over the country for surgeries. At work, he was very serious, meticulous, and attentive, fully aware of the weight of his responsibility. The second part of his personality lured him into completely different realms, making the adult, serious man ride through the streets on his bike at night. It also led him to learn to play the guitar in his teenage years and even form a band, which quietly disbanded as its members developed other interests. But the opportunity to become a local star fell into his hands. One day, he stumbled upon a bar with live music. They always welcomed those who were ready to entertain the guests with their guitar playing. At first, Sandro just performed a couple of songs as a visitor. People happily sang along, applauded, and thanked him. It gave him such a powerful energy boost that he soon couldn't imagine life without these performances. The bar's manager even made a contract with him, and now Sandro officially appeared on the stage several times a month for the entire evening, receiving a salary for it as well. The bar became his second home. No, he didn't develop a drinking habit, his work didn't allow for it. As a surgeon, he needed keen eyes and a steady hand. Sandro was drawn to the atmosphere of the establishment itself, and he made friends here. He even had admirers, which wasn't entirely unnecessary, considering that a couple of years ago, he had gone through a painful separation from his wife. Christina was dissatisfied with many things about her husband, his night shifts, dedication to work, unserious hobbies, and, most importantly, his doctor's salary. One day, she packed his belongings into suitcases and kicked him out of their mortgaged apartment. While I'm still young and beautiful, I'll find someone more serious who will make me happy. Do you need someone more serious than a surgeon? Sandro asked, puzzled, looking at the suitcases by the door. You're joking even now, Christina exclaimed. Your family is falling apart, and you're joking around. If I cry, will that change anything? Sandro asked. He tried to cope with the shock as the behavior of his wife turned out to be so unexpected for him. It seemed to him that everything was fine between them. The true reason became clear a little later. It turned out that Christina had been seeing one of her colleagues for a long time. Apparently, their relationship had taken a serious turn, and perhaps his wife had truly fallen in love, which led her to seek reasons for a breakup. Sandro indeed worked constantly, and he also devoted a lot of time to his hobbies, playing the guitar and riding his bike. It was his way of letting off steam and relieving tension. However, perhaps he should have played with his daughter more often and spent evenings with his wife. But Christina had never voiced any complaints and even refused to go to that bar, although Sandro often invited her. Anyway, Sandro moved into his bachelor apartment, the same one he lived in before getting married. Luckily, it was vacant. The previous tenants had recently moved out, and new ones had not yet appeared. Thus began his bachelor life. Sandro painfully experienced the separation from his wife. He believed that they had complete understanding, and he thanked fate for such a wise spouse. Her actions caught him completely off guard. Losing what had seemed to be a strong relationship was difficult, but what saddened Sandro the most was that he now saw his daughter less frequently. 5-year-old Julia stayed with him a couple of times a week. The little girl missed her father very much and promised that when she grew up a bit, she would move in with him, but for now, her mother wouldn't let her. Sandro genuinely felt sorry for his daughter. Because of them, her parents, the girl suffered. She loved her mother and father equally, and their separation caused her pain. Sandro suspected that it had inflicted a trauma on her, which might manifest itself during her teenage years. In the years after the separation from his wife, Sandro attempted to start serious relationships several times. He was considered an enviable bachelor at the hospital, and he had plenty of admirers at the bar, but somehow things didn't work out. Sandro didn't develop strong feelings for these women, and he had no desire to build another unhappy family. Eventually, he decided not to rush things. Sandro's life was already vibrant and fulfilling, and he was content with it. And then one day, she appeared at the bar, a beauty with unrealistically bright green eyes. This woman stood out with her special grace, elegant and light in her movements. And when her beautiful face lit up with a bright smile, Sandro could gaze at that sight forever. Secretly, of course, from a distance. He didn't dare to reveal his feelings to this woman. She might think he was just another bar regular trying to make a move. Especially since she was probably accustomed to such attention. Before Sandro's eyes, the beauty firmly rejected a slightly tipsy admirer. And there was also a gleaming wedding ring on her ring finger, which greatly saddened Sandro. The beauty always came with Julia, a longtime regular at the bar. Sandro awaited her appearance. Her mere presence filled him with joy. He couldn't take his eyes off her. He wanted to strike up a conversation with the stranger, run his hand through her impeccably smooth hair, and embrace her slender shoulders. But she wasn't available. Sandro didn't even attempt to get closer to her. Although he had never noticed such hesitancy in his interactions with women before. However, if this beauty were to show disinterest, all the magic between them would disappear, and he wouldn't be able to freely admire her anymore. Awkwardness would arise between them. So let everything unfold as it does. Perhaps a convenient opportunity would present itself, but for now, Sandro was content with her occasional appearances in the bar, delighting him with her presence. He had never experienced such feelings before. Even his first school crush, for whom he fought with a bully twice his size, couldn't compare to these sensations. It was a pity that Daniela didn't appear in the bar very often. He learned her name on the very first evening, hearing her friend called her. How he longed to say her name while looking into the beauty's eyes. Today, Daniela appeared in the bar again, and she looked simply stunning. As usual, her presence greatly pleased and inspired Sandro. From the moment Daniela entered the room, he played only for her. The man was able to read emotions and had long understood which of his songs the beauty particularly liked, so those were the ones he chose. The gazes of the male guests would frequently slide over to Daniela. She seemed to pay no attention to them, perhaps accustomed to such attention from an early age. Something indescribable changed in her today, and later Sandro realized what it was. Sadness appeared in the woman's eyes, and for some reason, her wedding ring had disappeared from her finger, which had deeply upset him before. He wondered, Daniela accidentally forgot to put it on or had a divorce with her husband. Sandro selfishly hoped for the last thing. He played one of Daniela's favorite songs and pondered whether it was finally time to approach her or not. Today seemed to be a special evening for her, and Sandro sensed it. Maybe this was his chance. He couldn't spend his whole life admiring the beautiful stranger from a distance without speaking to her. That wasn't like him. Usually, he was much bolder. Well, why not? Sandro thought. According to the terms of his agreement, he had 1 more hour of playing before he could play as he wished. He would definitely find an opportunity to talk to Daniela today, or at least try. Having made up his mind, Sandro calmed down and even felt relieved. His dream would come true today. He would finally call by name the woman he had secretly admired for an entire year. Have you noticed how all the guys here look at you? Julia asked. Roberto is a complete idiot to let such a beauty slip away. His lover isn't a walking nightmare, Daniela sadly replied. And she's young too. Well, you can't deny Roberto's taste. When are you going to tell him everything? Tomorrow. I'll wake up and call him first thing, and I'll tell him everything straight. That's right, don't delay. Or maybe we should call him right now. I also want to send a few sweet words to your husband. Not now, Daniela smiled at her determined friend. She enjoyed feeling her support. Well, as you say, Julia shrugged. Noticing some familiar faces, she energetically waved her hands at them. They beckoned her to their table, and her friend stepped away for a moment, allowing Daniela to dive into her phone. Recently, her sons had sent her photos from their latest conference, and Daniela proudly scrolled through them once again. Her children were her happiness and the light in her life. Oh, how difficult it would be to break the unhappy news to them. The boys would have to learn that their father had been leading a double life for several years. It would be a blow to the twins. Good evening. Daniela tore her eyes away from the screen. The musician who had been entertaining the crowd today had sat down at her table. There was nothing unusual about it. She had seen guitarists strike up conversations with guests many times before. Hello, Daniela smiled in response. The man looked at her warmly and smiled broadly. You seem a bit sad tonight. Don't you like the music? Do you want me to play something special for you? What's your favorite song? Oh, no, the music is wonderful, thank you so much. I always enjoy your playing, Daniela confessed. It's as if you're playing specifically for me. Sandro smirked to himself. There was no as if about it, he really was playing just for her. In that case, let me introduce myself, the guitarist smiled. So that you know whose music you enjoy. I'm Sandro. I'm Daniela. And you can speak more casually with me, otherwise, it feels too formal, as if I'm at work. Great. I prefer that too. After all, people come here to relax and unwind, not to think about work. At that moment, Julia returned to the table. As always, she was delighted to have the opportunity to talk to a new person. The three of them had a great time together, joking, laughing, and chatting about everything under the sun. Sandro engaged with both of them, but it was evident that he had a special interest in Daniela, and she was flattered by the guitarist's attention. She marveled at how she could be so happy on such an evening, but her soul felt light, warm, and calm. The bar will be closing soon, Julia announced, glancing at her watch. Wow, it's almost 4 a.m., Daniela exclaimed in surprise. I suggest taking a walk through the city at night, Sandro suggested and quickly added, I don't want to part ways with such a fun company. And so, the three adults, laughing loudly, strolled through the empty streets. It was the historic center, filled with buildings from the 18th and 19th centuries. It hadn't yet dawned. In the light of the street lamps, everything around them seemed like scenery from a fairy tale. How beautiful it is here, Daniela exclaimed. I've never been in the city center at this time, and it's simply magical. You are beautiful, Daniela, Sandro said, looking straight into her eyes. Well, there you go, my dream came true. I've told you that. What about me? Julia playfully asked. Am I beautiful too? Absolutely, Daniela and Sandro replied in unison. Then they put Julia in a taxi. She had exceeded her limit a bit at the bar, and now she needed to get home as soon as possible. Daniela and Sandro were left alone. Can you walk me to my car? Daniela asked. It's time for me to leave too. I have a better idea, Sandro said with a mysterious smile. They returned to the bar, and the man led his new acquaintance to his beloved motorcycle. This is my trusty steed, Sandro said affectionately, patting the vehicle's sleek side. Have you ever ridden on one of these? No, Daniela admitted. Everything that was happening felt like a dream. First, the pink phone, then the loneliness in the empty apartment and a whirlwind of memories. And now this encounter at the bar with a local guitarist, followed by a motorcycle ride. It seemed like fate was giving this woman, who had become a mother too early in life, a chance to make up for missed youthful moments. Sandro drove her right to her building. He had a spare helmet for the passenger. They arrived quickly, but it felt as if they weren't driving on nearly empty city streets, but soaring high above the ground. Daniela held on tightly to Sandro's shoulders. She couldn't see the happy smile on his face throughout the ride. That was amazing, Daniela confessed when they reached their destination. She looked slightly stunned. I understand, the man smiled at her. He looked at Daniela's beautiful flushed face and wanted more than anything to kiss her, but something told him it wasn't the right time. So, as a farewell, Sandro gallantly bowed and lightly kissed her hand with a touch of theatricality. Daniela responded with a playful curtsy. We'll see each other at the bar, he promised, hopping back on the bike. I really hope so, Daniela smiled back at him. Those words and her smile warmed Sandro's soul. He sped through the streets of the awakening city, recalling the details of this magical evening. Daniela clearly didn't mind his attention. On the contrary, she seemed to enjoy it. Sandro could see that. They exchanged phone numbers. Tomorrow, he would have to call her, invite her somewhere. To the movies or just for a walk, whatever she wanted. Then they could have a heart-to-heart conversation and get to know each other better. Tonight, neither of them had shared much about themselves, they just laughed and joked. Sandro sensed that this was exactly how the night should have been, and he took great pleasure in watching the sadness gradually fade from Daniela's beautiful green eyes. After all, she had seemed quite upset about something earlier in the evening. Perhaps tomorrow he would find out the reason. Daniela woke up closer to noon and immediately remembered the pink phone and the photos in it. Nausea set in. Today she had a difficult explanation with her husband ahead, and after that, they would definitely separate. She still had to tell the children everything. Daniela poured herself a cup of coffee and turned on the TV. Life wouldn't end with Roberto leaving. Yesterday evening was proof of that. It had been fun, and she had met a good person. Imagine that. A faint smile touched Daniela's lips as her phone chirped. It was Julia calling. Well, how was it? Does he snore? Julia asked without even greeting her. Come on, Sandro just gave me a ride home on his bike. That's all, Daniela replied. What a fool you are. That guitarist was looking at you so infatuatedly the whole evening, and you turned him down. A new man is the best remedy for the soul wounds inflicted by the previous one. I certainly know that. Well, he didn't really insist, Daniela confessed. He dropped me off at home, bid me goodbye like a gentleman, and sped off. Oh, of course, you acted like the Snow Queen there. I know you. But he hinted that we would see each other again, Daniela clarified. Don't even think about refusing a date. I wasn't planning on it, actually. That's my girl. By the way, have you talked to Roberto yet? That's why I'm calling. I immediately thought of him when I woke up. Not yet, Daniela sighed. I'm gathering the courage. Just don't take too long and don't dwell on it. Don't let the blame fall on yourself. Or maybe you want me to come along for support. We can go to him together. I'm burning with impatience to say a few sweet words to him. Thanks, but I have to do it myself. The friends talked a little more and said goodbye. Daniela looked at her phone, realizing that it was time to dial her husband's number. She finally made up her mind. Hi. We need to have a serious talk. I'm driving, and I'm on my way to you. They fixed your car, so I'm driving it now. As soon as Roberto crossed the threshold, Daniela immediately sensed that something was off with him. He looked somewhat troubled. Did he suspect that she knew everything, or did Juliet actually call him? She'll pay for it. Daniela, I went to your office this morning with the repairman to have a look at your car, but the office was closed. Yesterday you said you had an emergency, and everyone would be working on Saturday. I said that because I didn't want to go with you. That's the first thing that came to mind. What's going on? Roberto stared at his wife intently. How should I interpret all this? The pink phone. I found it yesterday while you were at the gas station, and it had so many interesting photos in it. I see, Roberto said, extending his words. So you're aware? Daniela was curious to hear how her unfaithful husband would start justifying himself, twisting the truth. She hoped to see surprise, confusion, and guilt on his face, but Roberto appeared calm and emotionless. As always, in recent years. A business shark. Yes, I'm aware. Tears welled up in Daniela's eyes again. She had wanted to be strong and cold in this moment, but it didn't work out. The betrayal from someone she considered so close hurt too much. Welp, that was nasty. Roberto comfortably settled into his chair. I was planning to tell you myself. We've been having a relationship for several years now. I figured it out. You're such a jerk. And all this time, I thought there was something wrong with me. No, everything is fine with you. I've always considered and still consider you a wonderful person. You'll find your own happiness. But this is betrayal. Do you understand? You led a double life for so many years? Daniela became increasingly heated. Roberto remained unaffected, as if he felt justified, which only fueled her anger. Please, let's have a constructive conversation, he said, looking at her with a mix of pity and dislike. That gaze was degrading. What is there to talk about? We're separating as soon as possible. There are simply no other options. I don't even know how you'll explain to our sons that you lied to us for so many years. I wanted to tell you all this gently, Roberto continued as if nothing had happened. You know I'm a candidate for deputy, right? Of course. I see billboards with your face all over the city every day. Now they just annoy me. Well, that's why I kept silent. I can't leave my wife, with whom I've spent 20 years, for a young mistress. Will your impeccable reputation suffer? Exactly. Daniela, I understand that I treated you poorly. That's an understatement. You're right. I'm not thrilled about this situation either, but I have a huge request for you. You? For me? A request? Yes, for the sake of our children's better future. And yours as well. That's interesting. Let's not formalize the paperwork yet. Let's play the role of a strong, united family until autumn. Let's attend a few events together. And after it's all over, we'll do things the way you want. Oh, I wish you to hear yourself. Daniela looked at her husband and realized she didn't really know this person. So, in this whole situation, all you care about is whether your reputation will suffer or not. If I gain power, it will be beneficial for our family, especially for our children. I'll have more opportunities to help our sons. Your children have been taking care of themselves for a long time, Daniela reminded him. But you won't be left without support either. You're now a close person to me forever, the mother of our sons. You can come to me with any problems. Just leave, Roberto. Daniela suddenly realized that she couldn't stand the presence of her once-beloved husband anymore. Fine, I'll do as you ask, but please leave now. I'm truly sorry, Axe said before stepping over the threshold. Oh, I almost forgot, I parked your car in the parking lot behind the house. Here are the keys. That's how simple and easy it was. No tantrums, shouts, or attempts from her husband to justify himself. It turns out he had planned to separate from her as well, but only after he achieved his goal. A little later, Sandro, the new acquaintance from the bar, called her and suggested going for a walk. Why not? Yesterday, he and Julia managed to distract her from her sorrowful thoughts perfectly. Maybe it would work the same way now? She didn't want to stay alone with her suffering in an empty apartment. Daniela and Sandro quickly became close. They shared their difficult stories with each other. It's true what they say, shared pain is half the pain. It became much easier for both of them after sharing their secrets. It was like a therapy session, but in a more pleasant and relaxed atmosphere. Daniela enjoyed feeling beautiful, desired, and incredibly attractive. And that's how Sandro saw her. It was evident in his gaze and actions. The woman understood that her mere presence made him happier. It was so refreshing after Roberto's cold indifference. Daniela dutifully played the role of a model wife. She had to appear with her almost ex-husband at several events. They posed together for the cameras as the perfect couple. Once Daniela had to answer a spicy question from a young journalist. She was curious about how she and her husband managed to maintain warm relations over a decade of marriage. It was actually quite amusing. Daniela realized that if it weren't for Sandro in her life, the interview would have caused her pain, but instead, she genuinely enjoyed herself, talking about love and understanding, the foundations of a strong union. Roberto seemed quite tense in that moment. He was probably afraid that his resentful wife would burst and ruin everything. But Daniela didn't care anymore. She was waiting for autumn and the end of this farce. In reality, it didn't change anything. She just wanted to stop being the wife of a man she didn't really know. A few months after they met, Daniela moved in with Sandro. They had deliberated for a while on whether to live in her apartment or his. He had said that a real man should bring his beloved woman to his place, and no other way. Daniela gladly complied. Sandro turned out to be a versatile person. When they met in the bar, Daniela assumed he was a guitarist, an eternal young soul who shunned seriousness and responsibility. But it turned out that her chosen one was not only all that, but also a talented surgeon. She observed with pride and immense pleasure how respected he was by people at the hospital, both doctors and patients. One day, she had to wait at the department until his shift was over. A complex patient had entered the hospital, and it seemed that only Sandro could help him. "You save lives," Daniela said when he finally finished that evening. "You're amazing. You're the best." "Oh, come on," Sandro blushed slightly. "Let's go to the bar. There's a new band playing tonight. It'll be interesting to listen to them." "I'm happy I met you," Daniela confessed. That was the absolute truth. It took experiencing the pain of her husband's betrayal to encounter such a sincere and loving person. Daniela was literally immersed in his love and care. She had never felt so serene and happy before. Shortly before the events that Daniela and Roberto were anxiously awaiting, he called her. It was a normal work morning. "We agreed," her husband shouted into the phone without any explanation. His usual icy calmness was nowhere to be found. "You promised to play the role of perfect wife until autumn." "I'm doing just that," Daniela replied. "Don't shout. Calmly tell me what happened. Have you not visited the local news website today?" "I haven't had a chance yet, so what's going on?" "Well, there's a photo of you and some guy together on a motorcycle. They took a picture of you near the bar. You've already taken off your helmets, so your faces are clearly visible. Paparazzi are already following us," Daniela retorted sarcastically. "Don't even joke. Have you completely lost it? Forgot how old you are? What bars are you talking about? What motorcycles? Well, yeah, you can have a mistress who's only slightly older than our sons. I don't have that right. Yeah, go ahead and date whoever you want. I don't care. But remember, I asked you to behave decently until autumn. Why are you so concerned about some stupid photos? Maybe I just went for a bike ride with a distant cousin or something. What's the problem anyway? With a distant cousin? Wait, I'll send you the link now," Roberto promised and hung up. Daniela immediately received a message with a note saying, "And you've created a problem for me." The link led to the local news website. There were photos of her and Sandro. Someone had captured them right by the bar. They had indeed taken off their helmets and kissed. Well, the cousin story definitely wouldn't work here. It seemed that Roberto was truly becoming an influential person in the city if they were watching him so closely. As Daniela looked at the photos, she thought about how much she was looking forward to all of this ending. She wanted to stop being a part of her ex-husband's life. The incident with the photos didn't significantly damage Roberto's current career. In autumn, everything went smoothly, and he obtained the desired position. On that day, Roberto even called Daniela with a joyful voice, thanking her for delaying the official divorce, promising that he would settle everything within a month. And it turned out that way. Soon, Daniela received a summons to court. "Should I accompany you?" Sandro asked. "No need. You have a lot of work to do. You're definitely more needed there. And this, it's just a formality." Daniela encountered an unpleasant surprise in court. It turned out that their family home, cars, the country house in the prestigious area, and everything else belonged to a certain Angelina Sergeyevna, meaning the spouses had no jointly acquired property to divide. Daniela was left with only a studio apartment that Roberto had given her as a birthday gift. Is Isabel Serrano Blanco your mistress or something? Daniela inquired while signing the papers. She's practically my wife, Roberto smiled. I see. So you trust her so much that you transferred all the property to her. So I wouldn't get anything? Admit it, it's fair. You stayed at home while I built my career, earned money, took risks. Do you think it was easy for me? I raised our children, Daniela reminded him. As soon as they grew up, I went to work. For a measly salary, Roberto retorted. And I'm leaving you a whole apartment. That's more than fair in our situation. Well, I'm not offended, Daniela shrugged. It's just that you disappoint me more and more. How good it is that we're parting ways. Surprisingly, their sons took the news that their parents were no longer together calmly. Both of them had a vibrant life in Moscow. They had jobs, new friends, and they constantly traveled for conferences and competitions. Oh, come on, you're adults, you have the right to decide how to live, and for us, you'll still be our mom and dad, the older son smiled at Daniela from the laptop screen. She had just carefully chosen her words to tell the children that they had separated. And we still love both of you the same, the son who was born 15 minutes later added. After the conversation with the children, Daniela felt relieved. It was good that her sons were already so mature and understanding. She had worried that the boys would be upset about it, but they took the news lightly. Life went on. Daniela was absolutely happy with Sandro. They understood each other without words, almost at a glance. They traveled a lot, exploring the city and its local attractions. Whenever they had time, they would go somewhere further, usually on Sandro's beloved bike. You deserve this, Julia sincerely rejoiced for her friend. By the way, you also played a role in my happiness, Daniela smiled. Who invited me to have a good time that evening? Oh, come on, Julia waved her hand. If not that evening, he would have approached you on another one. I've noticed for a long time how Sandro looks at you, but back then you were being a dutiful wife to Roberto, not paying attention to anything like that. That's true, confirmed Sandro. I spent a whole year just admiring you from a distance and never dared to approach you, not even hoping for anything. Besides, you had a ring on your finger. Roberto's career was on the rise. Daniela didn't intentionally follow his life, but articles and videos about him constantly popped up on the internet. Her ex-husband had finally married his Isabel. The news of their wedding made it into the press, but didn't cause much of a sensation. Nowadays, no one is surprised by new young wives. 2 years passed. Sandro and Daniela were already husband and wife. They really wanted to have a child together, but the long-awaited pregnancy didn't happen, so they decided to adopt a child from an orphanage. It's even better, Sandro reassured her. We'll make one lonely little person on this earth happier. Daniela fully agreed with this opinion. She spent a long time looking through profiles of orphans and finally found a child for them, a 2-year-old boy with big bewildered eyes. Indeed, it turned out that he had a 10-year-old sister. So it seems they will make not just one person happy but two. Daniela, of course, was nervous but eagerly awaited the end of September. That was the scheduled date for meeting the children. Sandro was also living in anticipation. Daniela was working with contracts when Julia, excitedly, burst into her office. What, another inspection coming our way? Daniela speculated. No, I have news. I don't know if it's good or bad, but for me, it's more on the good side. He deserves it. The boomerang effect in action. Explain properly, I can't understand anything. Well, I just read this about your Roberto. It's better if you see it for yourself. Julia closed the work program window on Daniela's computer and went to a news website, clicking around until Daniela's gaze fell upon an article with photos. Her ex-husband had a gloomy face and was posing in handcuffs surrounded by police. With her heart pounding, she read the text. It turned out that Roberto had been arrested for embezzlement, and he was facing a serious sentence, not to mention that his path forward was bleak. It looked like a complete downfall for her former beloved spouse. Daniela knew that work and career meant everything to him. How terrible, the woman uttered. Unlike her friend, she felt no joy at the sight of the glum Roberto. But he deserved it. He was grabbing money. He left you for a young beauty. What goes around comes around. You get what you emit. Julia fired off aphorisms. Stop it, he's the father of my children. Oh, I have to somehow tell the twins about this. They probably already know about it, even the national news mentioned it. It's quite a substantial sum. Roberto made a national splash. Well, the son doesn't bear responsibility for the father. Times have changed. It won't affect the children. Roberto, Daniela said with bitterness. Oh, why do you feel sorry for him? He stole a ton of money. He has plenty of valuable assets. He'll bribe someone, get a suspended sentence, and enjoy himself on the Canary Islands with his young wife. What about you? Such people never get in trouble. But Julia was wrong. Roberto did end up being imprisoned. Daniela visited him once since they were still connected by many things. Sandro supported her decision and even drove her to the correctional facility, but he didn't enter. He stayed in the car by the gate. Roberto looked pale and thin, with no trace of his former confidence. Before Daniela sat a broken and bewildered man. Oh, I didn't expect you to want to visit me, he said, surprised to see his ex-wife. Isabel never came here once. That's strange, Daniela exclaimed. She's your wife, and aren't you supposed to be there for each other in both good and bad times? Well, that's how it is. She's one of those people who are only around in good times. And why didn't you repay the debt? You could have gotten a suspended sentence. You have money after all. I have nothing, unfortunately, Roberto replied with regret. I transferred everything to my wife. Just like our house? Don't remind me. I know I'm a fool and a scoundrel. Yes, everything, including our house and everything else, seemed more secure, or so I thought. If my companies had gone bankrupt, I wouldn't have had to pay with my own assets. In reality, I had nothing. And what about her? Daniela couldn't believe what she was hearing. Didn't she try to get you out of here? As you can see, she didn't. She said she's not responsible for my mistakes and that my problems are solely mine. Now, go ahead and tell me that I'm getting what I deserve and that it serves me right. Roberto, what are you saying? You're in serious trouble. I'm so sorry that I can't help you. I know that if the situation were reversed, you would definitely try to save me, no matter what. Thank you. It means a lot to me to hear that. Daniela left the correctional facility in complete confusion and told Sandro everything. Well, you should believe in the boomerang of fate after this, Sandro said, puzzled. In the fall, Daniela and Sandro welcomed a new addition to their family, a son and a daughter. I'm getting used to becoming a mother in bulk, Daniela smiled, embracing the children. The little ones were genuinely happy to finally have a family. Their gleaming eyes were the best reward for the newly minted parents. You're doing such a great job, Julia, who came to visit them, exclaimed. She was hugging Daniela and Sandro's 2-year-old son. I've missed little ones so much. Meanwhile, her own children were playing with the toddler's sister in the next room. All 3 of them were almost the same age, so they had a lot of fun and enjoyed each other's company. Daniela smiled, observing this idyllic scene. Now she felt needed and deeply loved. She was in the right place. Sandro approached her and hugged her shoulders. After the New Year holidays, the growing family went to the neighboring region to visit Sandro's parents. They brought his daughter from his previous marriage, Julia, with them. Daniela had never been a guest at her in-laws' house before. Usually, in-laws would come to visit them. And now, Sandro and Daniela were taking the children to introduce them to their grandparents, who were eagerly awaiting the meeting with their grandchildren. Daniela liked their large cozy house. Sandro's parents lived in a bedroom community and had a small well-maintained garden and a swimming pool. When you come in the summer, you won't want to leave, the grandfather assured, winking at the children. Can't wait, the girls exclaimed in unison, while the little boy shyly smiled. He was still getting used to his new relatives and felt a bit shy. Then everyone sat in the living room around a large table. Sandro's mother had prepared many incredibly delicious dishes: roasted goose with baked potatoes, salads, and hot sandwiches. It was clear that she was making an effort to welcome the esteemed guests. Daniela could sense that Sandro's parents liked her, and she found these simple, friendly people pleasant as well. After the festive dinner, Daniela helped clear the table. Sandro and his father were entertaining the children outside. The caring grandfather had prepared an ice slide for the little ones in advance, and now they were taking turns sliding down with loud screams and laughter. Watching this colorful group was a pure delight. "Our son is happy with you," the mother-in-law remarked with a smile. "After he broke up with Christina, I was so worried about him. He looked lost, and then you came along." The old, determined, cheerful, strong Sandro returned. "We both supported each other during difficult times," Daniela confessed. "I also went through tough times when I met him." "Destiny," the elderly woman concluded meaningfully. Laughter and shouts outside grew louder as the men started a snowball fight with the children. "Look how they've bonded," Sandro's mother commented happily. "It seems like Sandro himself was a little one not long ago, and now he's a respectable surgeon and a father of many." "Can you show me his childhood photos?" Daniela suddenly asked. "I've only seen pictures of him from his college days, more or less. It would be interesting to see what he looked like as a child." "I'd be happy to," the elderly woman smiled. "Wait a moment, I'll bring some old chubby albums from the bedroom. Do you need any help?" "Oh no, don't worry, they're not heavy." Daniela settled on the soft couch. Surprisingly, she felt warm and comfortable in this house. She was accepted here as a family member, and it was clear that the relationships were genuine, not just an attempt to please. They spoke to her so naturally and effortlessly, as if they had known her since childhood. The mother-in-law returned with several plump old albums. They started with photos of a very young Sandro, a newborn baby. "At that time, our father was into photography," the elderly woman explained. "Nobody had their own camera. It's hard to imagine now. But we had one. My husband developed the film himself, printed the photos, did everything in the bathroom. If it weren't for that, we wouldn't have a single photo of our little son." Daniela smiled as she gazed at the wrinkled face of the defenseless tiny infant. She couldn't find any resemblance to her current husband. But that wasn't surprising. Then came photos of Sandro at around 2 years old, and Daniela understood why she had chosen their son's profile from the multitude of orphan profiles. As a child, her husband looked just like this dark-eyed little boy. The mother-in-law noticed it too. "When Sandro sent me a photo of your little one, I immediately fell in love with him wholeheartedly because he's a spitting image of little Sandro." "Yes, it's amazing." As Daniela looked at her husband's childhood photos at a more advanced age, she felt a strange sensation. A thought was swirling in her head, but she couldn't grasp it. And suddenly, she trembled with surprise and immediately understood everything. But how? Could such a thing happen in life? Before her was a photo of Sandro from kindergarten. "And this is Sandro at his graduation," smiled the mother-in-law. "Ah, how he loved going to daycare." Daniela pointed to a little girl in the front row, with big red bows and scraped knees. "And that's me." Daniela had the exact same photo at home. She finally realized what feeling had been haunting her. Sandro, the same childhood friend from daycare who gave her a wire ring and promised to marry her. Well, the boy had truly kept his word. "What a coincidence!" exclaimed the mother-in-law, raising her hands. "We actually lived in your city at that time, and Sandro attended the local daycare. It turns out you've known each other since early childhood. We have to tell our father right away." Upon learning everything from Daniela, Sandro beamed. "Well, it's no wonder I always felt like I've known you my whole life. Of course, I remember that little girl. I truly fell in love at the age of 5. It's impossible to forget. But can such coincidences really happen? It's like a miracle. Daniela couldn't believe it. Of course, it's a miracle. Having my entire life next to you is one continuous miracle.
If you're enjoying it as well, leave a like and subscribe.